Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. As Dan already said, the topic is kusala. And this is a word and a teaching that is very near and dear to Beth Upton's heart, and something she almost hesitates to translate, wishes to bring into, I think, even the mainstream language. This idea of how we can be responding to our lives, our bodies, our hearts, our friends, our lives, our experience in a productive way, in a way that does help us, does lead to happiness, does uh, lead away from harm. And I was not aware of this teaching until meeting her because it comes from the Abhidhamma. There's a lot about kusala in the Abhidhamma. And I had spent most of my time in the Thai forest tradition, which doesn't really lean on the Abhidhamma very much. And the Abhidhamma is the third basket of the Pali Canon. There's the basket of the suttas, the basket of the Vinaya, the code of training for monks and nuns, and then the Abhidhamma. And the Abhidhamma was was written after the Buddha passed away. And this is, I think, some of the reasons why there's a leaning away from it in the Thai forest tradition. There's a movement now called like EBT, early Buddhist texts. And so that being said, the Abhidhamma it was written about 150 years after the Buddha passed away. It's really just a technical systemization, very precise, technical systemization of the doctrines that the Buddha laid out in the suttas, and primarily about the momentary mentality and materiality, that phenomena that constitute our life's experience. And in the Abhidhamma, it makes it clear that kusala gets defined quite specifically, this beneficial, wholesome, skillful, useful, productive way to live. And it says that the wholesome mind, the wholesome mind states are that there's a palette, and there's several mental factors that co-arise. They all come together. If you have one, all the others are there. And often they're in different strengths. One might be quite predominant, and some others might be quite faint, but they're all there. It's like a curry sauce, and we've all had different curries, and sometimes you've got more of this ingredient and more of that ingredient, and so the flavor's a little bit different. But the curry, that it's a curry, is consistent. So what are all these factors that co-arise? They are mindfulness, faith, non-greed, non-hate, and then our conscience. And in Pali, it's hiri and ottappa. And then there is this collection of three that describe sort of the almost the viscosity. It's lightness and flexibility, and right now I can't remember the third. Lightness, softness, and flexibility. And then we have an uprightness and a proficiency. And these all co-arise. And sort of to make it evident that, oh yeah, this is true. I think this is why we often can't just stop just when we describe mindfulness with the word mindfulness. We always have to add in this idea of non-judgmental and like accepting and flexible. Often when you hear meditation teachers, Dhamma teachers talk about mindfulness, they add these other descriptors. Why? Because the non ill will is there when it's truly a moment of mindfulness. And so what is very exciting is that it's very clear from the Abhidhamma that the mind, and I think that neuroscience is getting there, the mind moves indescribably quickly. There's no describing how fast our minds are moving. And they can only be doing one thing at a time. Now but it moves very, very quickly. So this is how it works. This is how, when we maybe have an unwholesome, akusala emotion or mind state arise, like anger or fear, when we are mindful of it, and see, this is where then the mind is going ridiculously fast. There's this awareness of something that's unwholesome, but the awareness part is extremely wholesome. So whenever you're mindful, and if you're mindful of anger, what you're doing is very much helping yourself because you're interrupting um the unwholesome. It's and so it's and what that does is slow down the momentum of the wholesome. And this is where mindfulness is one of our best tools. But there's two reasons to really unpack mindfulness, unpack kusala and understand it, like having a working definition and understand the practicality of it. One is that it's important to know, because this is the main instruction of the Buddha. We want to be going in a direction where wholesome mind states, kusala, is increasing and akusala is decreasing. So to really understand what is wholesome, what is that? To really understand it in all of its flavors and the whole palette is extremely helpful for us. And then the second thing is that when you realize, like non-greed, when you realize, this is part of the mindfulness package. This is part of the kusala package. There's sort of one. There's something simple about wholesome. It's just these things, and if any of them are there, the others are there. So it just gives us more tools to work with the unwholesome on and off the cushion. So, for example, we could be meditating, and we could get to a threshold in our meditation where it's like, this is, and we've all had this experience of like, there's some momentum gaining, and I've just sort of popped into something that's unfamiliar. Like my meditation just went slightly deeper, deeper maybe than it's ever gone. And often, for many of us, when that happens, fear arises. And so it's wonderful if we have some more ideas, more tools than just being mindful of the fear. Mindfulness maybe isn't the best antidote for fear. We can then lean into our faith. Faith, I didn't mention it. Sorry, faith is one of the most important. Of all of the qualities of kusala, mind states, the, the most important are the mindfulness, faith, which I neglected to say, I think. Mindfulness, faith, non-greed, and non-ill will. These are the ones we're going to really, really, at different times, lead with. Normally, we're always trying to lead with our mindfulness because of, for many of us, the instructions we've been given, which are wonderful. And then there's this whole other chapter that can be very, very helpful for us in our meditation. There's times we're going to want to lead with our faith, So if you've had experiences in your meditative journey where things have gotten a little bit dry or a little bit rote, automatic, then we can, pick up some of these other flavors. This faith, non-greed, non-ill will. Non-greed and non-ill will, this is the other thing. When we're meditating, we can start to zero in on, underscore, highlight these qualities that are there. If we're mindful, they are there. So really the big job that mindfulness has in this kusala palette is for us to remember. And you've probably heard that sati, a good translation for sati is memory. And initially, when the Pali Canon was being translated into English, the word chosen to translate sati was recollectedness, which is quite a good translation. This recollectedness. So sati is this remembering to be present, remembering to be aware, remembering, to be with my meditation object. And we've seen it perform that function while we're meditating. You're meditating and then suddenly you're remembering a conversation, or you're planning your dinner, or you're, and then you remember, oh wait, oh no, I'm meditating, and you bring the attention back to your meditation object. That's your mindfulness. But while we're meditating, we can also key in to our faith, and it can be extremely uplifting. You're meditating, and then you just remember, there's your mindfulness, that this is a gift you're giving to yourself. Or you remember the different ways that you've already benefited from coming in contact with the Buddha's teachings. This is your faith. And sometimes we experience our faith, if we're more of a devotional type, just even entering a sacred space, and bowing to the Buddha, bowing to the Dhamma, bowing to the Sangha. Then we can also be leading with non-greed and non-ill will. These can become two of our very best friends. And this whole group, they are friends. They all come to the party together. And when we zero in on our non-greed, both non-greed and non-ill will, these These are contentment. They're contentment and they're imbued with wisdom. When we are really in a place of non-greed, the wisdom has to be there because we are disentangling ourselves from the primary force that keeps us in samsara, the primary force that often is running our lives. And we can bring into our meditation, and it can really hurt us because we're meditating and then the greed creeps in. And the way that the greed and the wanting creep into our meditation often is that we're wanting to see results, we're wanting to go deeper, we're wanting to get something out of the meditation. And we can counter all of that. First of all, we can, if we focus in on non-greed, and we're having trouble finding it, then we can be like suspicious, like, oh, maybe there's some unconscious expectations or unconscious wanting happening here. And I want to bring it into consciousness and dissolve it away with my wisdom so that it doesn't trip me up. And this whole process, we're going to need to do this over and over and over again. And this is the the reconditioning and the retraining of the mind, because this is seeing the worldliness that can come into our practice and then dealing with it. And this will really change us. We have a bunch of cards. It was a gift, and they're little sayings by Ajahn Brahm. And one of my favorite, and for me, the monk that will talk about contentment a lot is Ajahn Brahm. And he is a very peaceful, happy person. Do you know who Ajahn Brahm is? Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, Ajahn Brahm is he was he's a very, very senior monk. He's in his 70s, and he was a student of Ajahn Chah's for about 9 years in Thailand. He's from London, East London, poor East London, but he was very bright, got a scholarship to Cambridge, and in theoretical physics, and then was a teacher for a couple of years, and then went to Thailand and ordained like at age 22. And he is the senior monk at a very large monastery in Australia called Bodhinyana. And he wrote a book, Mindfulness, Bliss, and Beyond, a very, very good book. He's also written a book, Who Ordered This Truckload of Dung? And that's talking about just who did, as you start to meditate, it's like, where did all these crazy thoughts come from? Like, who ordered this truckload of dung? He's a really fantastic, fantastic Dhamma teacher and meditation teacher, and very wise and very compassionate. I suggest you look him up, listen to him, read something by him. But one of these little cards says, if you want to be happy, lower your expectations. And I would add, if you want to be happy, become aware of your expectations so you can start to shine wisdom on them, shine wisdom and compassion. So yeah, this leading with non-greed and non-ill will. It's a wonderful practice while we're meditating to zero in on them, find them in your body, find them in your experience, because you will. Because if you're mindful, they're there. And I always found it very interesting when I first came to the Buddha's teachings, why he talked about non-greed and non-ill will. And in my in my ignorance and in my arrogance, it was like, it felt like the bar was too low. Like, why not talk about generosity and metta, the active, positive side? And then I've been meditating maybe three or 4 years, and it was at my father's death. And my father died a very, very beautiful death, just in his chair, a chair similar to this in the living room. He had COPD, emphysema, and he was on oxygen, and it was obvious that there was a decline. But he was able to stay at home, and he was in his 80s, and my mom was there, I was there, and my sister was there. And I had a brother on his way, but he didn't make it. And my father had been an alcoholic, and my mom had uh, chosen to stay with him, but maybe not done enough of her own personal work. So she had a lot of ill will and a lot of frustration, disappointment, a lot of unmet needs that she was angry about. But my father's death, it was very, very beautiful. And right as he died, I'm talking minutes, I watched the ill will die in my mom. It just went into the grave with my father. It just was literally gone. He died, and it was like she was released, she was freed. That's just the way that particular scenario played out. But what hit me was like, oh, this is why the Buddha says non-ill will, because ill will really is the problem. And it's this huge cloud, it's this huge barrier. And when it's removed, what's left is quite free, expansive, and beautiful. And it was such a powerful lesson. Like, so non-greed and non-ill will, they sound like not that hard, or maybe the bar is low, but actually, if we can accomplish that, have move into times where that's the case, it's extremely beautiful. There's a story about a monk in Burma, and this story comes through. I think it's. I used to think it was Michelle McDonald, but I think it's actually, I can't remember her name. Another well-known lay teacher. I think it'll come to me. Rebecca Bradshaw. I thought it would come to me. I don't know if people know Rebecca Bradshaw. She's a lovely lay teacher. And she told this story about being in Burma and being with this monk that to her was definitely the happiest person that she had ever met. And she asked him, like, how? Like, why? And he said, oh, it's because I don't have any ill will. And Rebecca Bradshaw was sharing this story to, she said it gave her pause. She was surprised. And it was the same lesson I think I learned with my mother. Like, oh, if ill will is not there, it's really noticeable. Like, it's very beautiful. Non ill will, non greed. And we can focus in on these while we're meditating. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience where you're meditating and it just is very lovely. And then you realize, oh, I've got quite a bit of peace here because nothing needs to be any different. And this is a way that we can zero in, highlight, underscore the non-ill will that will be there when we're mindful. Is just be like, nothing needs to be any different. And then you're leading with non-greed. And it doesn't mean it's exactly the way that you would want it, you know? So we can do this without it being ideal, without it being perfect. We can sit there and we could have some kind of pain in the neck, or we could have some kind of tightness in the chest. But if we just lean in to and welcome, and it doesn't need to be any different. You will be surprised at how, like in your cells, you'll feel an unburdening. You'll feel a relief. Like, oh, this is a completely different strategy than we approach most of our lives. We've all been so conditioned to the strategy of, tweak it a little bit, like just fix it just a little bit, just, you know, get it a little bit warmer, like get it a little bit quieter, get a little bit more comfortable. But if we drop that strategy, because that's all based in greed and actually a little bit of ill will. They're so close. They're really the same energy, just flipped. They're just the inverse. And just be like, nothing needs to be any different. And then we can even get active, like welcome and welcome, welcome. What else is there? When people are dealing with sloth and torpor, like dullness and drowsiness, Beth always says, well, are you sleeping enough? And if they are, then her very next instruction will usually be, then ask yourself, what's the most unpleasant part of my experience right now? Because dullness and drowsiness, if we're well rested enough, if we're not, tired, like literally didn't have enough sleep, kind of tired, or, just exhausted from the intensity of life. If we're well rested, we're pretty resourced, and we're dealing with dullness and drowsiness, usually it's because there's something in our heart, mind, body, life that we're not wanting to face, we're not wanting to feel, that we're numbing out to in some way. So these are really the four really big ones of the kusala palette. Mindfulness, which we're all familiar with, but it really plays the memory component. The non-judgment and the accepting part is the non-ill will and non-greed. So this mindfulness, faith, non-ill will, non-greed. These are the four really big ones. And we want, when we're meditating, to be tuning into them, noticing them, and at times strengthening them, at times leading with them, and certainly, loving them and becoming really good friends with them. And then um, just moving on for the next ones, the um, the conscience, the hiri otapa. Do you know these Pali words, hiri otapa? Have people heard them? Hiri otapa. That's in Pali, and they really are describing our conscience. And the Buddha calls them the guardians of the world, these two mental factors that are in every wholesome mind moment. They're there and they perform a function. And it's very helpful to come to understand them, that they are wholesome. When your conscience speaks to you, when your conscience pricks you, or even when the conscience, you know, after the fact is like, oof, you know what? I really didn't need to say that. This is still wholesome. This is something to celebrate. It's funny, many of us, when we feel like, oh, I could have done better, or we think this is unwholesome. Think this, we're like performative. And no, this is still in the realm of kusala, wholesome. It's your conscience doing its work. It's your conscience um, functioning, and you want to pay attention to it. So it's like, oof, I really didn't need to say that. Well, then stop, you know, and perhaps even make amends. Like just say that out loud, depending on who your communication partner is, obviously. It's like you can just say that. You know what? I didn't really need to say that. And or you could even go farther. I didn't need to say that. That wasn't coming from a good place. And if I could take it back, I would. We can make amends. Or if your conscience is speaking to you as you're scrolling on your phone, you know, listen to that conscience and realize that this is your friend and this is wholesome. Wholesomeness at work. We want to be listening to our conscience. And in the suttas, when someone does listen to their conscience and they come forward with like, I've done a transgression, the response, the Buddha's response, and then the Buddha's followers, their response is, this is growth. This is growth in the Dhamma. That someone is seeing some aspect of their uh, of their mind, their body, some aspect of their behavior that isn't in line with the Dhamma, and can um, get become aligned. This is growth. So this is something to celebrate. We can celebrate our mistakes when we see them, and then when we recalibrate and set ourselves in a better direction. This is not a negative thing. If if we do not pay attention to our conscience and uh, we don't make amends, we don't make an adjustment, we don't respond, what will happen is then when we are meditating, it will percolate up again. And now it's going to be the fourth hindrance of restlessness and remorse. And now we've moved from the wholesome over to the unwholesome. And we have more. It's gotten heavier, and we have more to clear out and to clean out. We still can, and it's very important. If you're meditating and some remorse percolates up, great. Just tell it, thank you, you've done your job, and I release you. And make a plan for forgiving yourself, for letting it wash away, and but tell it, thank you, you've done your job. If we don't do that, if we let remorse, if we hang out in remorse, and we can sometimes, we're quite prone to being hard on ourselves. We're quite susceptible to negative. We're quite susceptible to heavy. And sometimes we don't have a lot of wisdom around it. We think this shows that we care, or shows that we're a good person somehow, that I feel so guilty. No, this, in the Buddha's teachings, this is a hindrance. Guilt has no place. It's a hindrance. It's something that we do not want to hang out there and put any energy there. If we didn't listen to our conscience, if it's moved to remorse, we still can respond skillfully by just seeing it, admitting to it, and making amends in some way. And sometimes it could be old stuff. We just need to forgive ourselves. We just need to maybe come to understand in fact, I was doing the best I could at that time with the level of wisdom I had, the level of resources I had, the level of support I had, and I and now many of those things have changed, and I can and will do differently. If we don't do that, it gets heavier still. And then we can move into feeling shame and feeling somehow identified with this thing, like I just am an angry person, or I just am an impatient person, or I'm not generous. This is very, very unwholesome, very unwholesome. So this is in this kusala palette where the conscience, the hiri otapa, um, come in and how they work. And then this lightness, softness, flexibility. This is this becomes absolutely the predominant quality of the mind when we've experienced deeper states of jhana. These are the descriptions. The mind becomes wieldy and malleable and soft. And then, but you will experience that as you're meditating, and as the kusala, you're spending more and more time in wholesome mind states. You will notice. I mean, many meditators talk about it, feeling more spacious. We become more spacious, more flexible, more forgiving, more understanding, more compassion with ourselves and with others. It's like of um, uh, the opposite of being uptight. You know, you think of the opposite of softness is kind of hard and harsh. The opposite of gentleness is like harsh. The opposite of lightness, heavy. Soft, light, flexible. We're not rigid. We're not stuck. This is all part of the wholesome palette. And then there's uprightness. We've all felt that. We've all felt that. Like these times where we've had a meditation, you feel like you've been cleaned inside, and you feel upright. The body sometimes, even in meditation, becomes soft and flexible and upright. And this softness and uprightness are right at the beginning of the Metta Sutta. Talks about this is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness. Let them be upright and able, gentle in speech. This is the mudu and uju in Pali, soft and upright. And then the last is this proficiency. And again, you'll know this when the mind is in a bright, wholesome frame. When that's there, we're very proficient. It's like you do one thing at a time. You're chopping the vegetables. You're not upset. You're not preoccupied, and it's simple, straightforward. It's light, and you're able and upright. That's that uprightness and proficiency. So this is a wonderful, useful, and very thorough definition of wholesome. And this is the direction that we're going. Our entire meditation practice, our entire spiritual lives are about increasing wholesome mind states and decreasing unwholesome. And the palette for the wholesome mind is this mindfulness, and it brings along with it faith, non-greed, non-ill will, our conscience, the hiri and the otapa, and then this lightness, softness, flexibility, and an uprightness and a proficiency. So I feel like I've been talking very fast. I've been with little kids. So yeah, I'm moving way faster than I typically do. and I'm in the monastery. But I'll stop there and would so welcome questions. Yeah. Um, uh, Another translation, the Pali word is uh, sada. Another translation that can land more softly and maybe more usefully for people that have had some difficult experiences in with this idea of believing these things that are not knowable experientially is confidence. Confidence. And Beth Upton often just talks about confidence that this is worthwhile, confidence that this works. And sometimes I think I need to borrow faith, like literally, like it helps me being around somebody that has had deeper experiences in meditation that know for sure that this does work. These instructions do go over here. They do lead to this place. Um, so there are times that I borrow the confidence, like someone else is really confident that something can work, and being around that can be uh, very strengthening. And I think another thing I could say about confidence is we can make sure that we are, and the suttas say this, the Buddha gives instructions. It's very important for us quite regularly to be reflecting on the ways that we have already experienced freedoms, actually, the ways that the mind has already experienced liberation. Obviously, this is not the liberation, but like I am free from a few habits that I had. I'm definitely free from a few um, patterns of thinking, and I see that getting more and more free. And others of you also, there's things like, you know what, that's really not a problem for me anymore. That really doesn't get to me. It doesn't trip me up. I don't fall into that. And but the Buddha is really clear. This is not like belief. The Buddha, is very clear. Come and see for yourself. Try this out yourself. And Ajahn Tanisro, do you know who this is? Ajahn Tanisro? He's another Thai forest monk, and he lives in San Diego. He's done a lot of writing. He talks about having a working hypothesis, and I think that this works for um, scientific Western critical thinking minds. I'm kind of taking the Buddha on his word, and I'm going to use it as a working hypothesis, and I'm going to try and get my own data. Yeah. But, as you go deeper in meditation, you realize, oh, faith is really important. Like I am having to trust the Buddha, trust the Dhamma, definitely. But I'm continually getting evidence that it's true. Yeah. Great. Okay. Wonderful. Ah. Hmm. So, ding. Bing.